Hi, I'm Morgan.
And I'm Jake, and this is
Neverland Navigation Radio.
where we go on holiday at one of the Walt Disney World resorts in the past. This was not a good one.
That was
This was
weird.
not a good one. Sorry. What I meant to say was today we are looking back at some interesting history from Walt Disney World resorts.
Yeah, we each picked one.
We each picked
We
one.
tried to pick the same one.
Yeah, this was the very first. You guys, every week, Morgan and I pick a topic and we text it to Morgan's husband, Michael. And this was the first time that I said, "Can I do the contemporary?" And he said, "No." Morgan's already picked that. And I thought, wow, all right, I'm going to have to think on my feet. So I did. So there's no guessing for yours, which I guess is fine because you're going first this week.
Yeah, which is good because this is where my notes are and close to out of battery.
You're close to out of battery?
Yeah, but I'll make it.
All right. There's an added layer of suspense to your story this week. Are you going to make it through?
No, it should be fine.
Okay, good. Way to set us at ease. How are you this week?
I was going to say, are we just diving in?
I was going to say, I think this is the quickest we've ever tried to get into the podcast content.
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. I actually had a lot of fun doing I usually try to do research for this a little bit ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
But this has been a super busy week for me. So I ended up doing my research for the podcast this morning. So I've had a great morning of digging
of Disney-ness.
Yeah, of digging through different accounts of the history of what I'm talking about. So it's really gotten me in the mood to discuss all the details. And also,
awesome.
I am very fascinated by the history or the existence of what you're talking about. So I've been excited to hear the details all day because Michael told me that you're doing it.
Yeah. I love mine because it's original Disney World history.
As original as it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we talked for a minute. So
we can go ahead and jump in.
So now I guess it's time to turn back the clock.
All right. Okay, so I did the Contemporary. The Contemporary was one of the opening day hotels for Walt Disney World. There were two. So that's why I thought that the history was going to be extra interesting. Plus, I had heard tidbits of interesting things that had happened, and I was, I don't know, really looking forward to all of that, right? So the Contemporary Resort was originally going to be called the Tempo, which I was like, well, that seems like it would work. And then I realized it's the middle of the word contemporary.
Yeah.
So of course it would work.
But has a whole nother musical connotation as well.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
The Tempo. It's so 70s chic. You know
yes,
what I mean? It's a product of its time.
It's funny because I think now it would kind of age it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Although the Contemporary, it's always been kind of funny because it's not contemporary. Right. You know what I mean? I'm sure it was.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it does when you say contemporary art or mod art or whatever, it does take you to a certain time period that I think the Contemporary hits on a little bit.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
But it also, I think, is one of those things where contemporary is it could mean a bunch of things. It's pretty vague.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of room for doubt in the Polynesian or the Grand Floridian. But the Contemporary, that feels a little more elastic.
The Contemporary, I feel suffers the same fate as Tomorrowland.
Sure.
Where you're trying to keep up. You know what I mean?
Right.
With being contemporary, with being tomorrow. And at some point, you just can't do that.
It's ironic that they're right next to each other.
Yeah.
You can see them
they're
from
neighbors.
One another. They
Yeah.
are.
So anyway, so this was one of two of the opening day hotels, and the other one was the Polynesian. The frame portion of this hotel is called Contemporary Tower, in case you didn't know that. There's also the Bay Lake Tower, which was built more recently. It was added in 2009, which is a DVC section of Contemporary. Have you stayed there?
I have not.
Have you eaten there?
At the Top of the World?
At any of them?
Oh, in the
Well, we ate at Steakhouse 71,
I've eaten at
and
Steakhouse
you've eaten at the
71.
Wave, right?
And I ate at the
That
Wave
was a
when Steakhouse 71 was the Wave.
yeah,
But I have not eaten at the other restaurants
Chef
there.
Mickey's
Chef Mickey's, I have never
and
done.
California Grill.
Or California Grill. I
Yeah.
almost ate at California Grill the night of my wedding. That's not what we ended up doing because we shifted around the locations of things. But I've never been. I've never done that California Grill. People do the California Grill fireworks
Yeah.
experience over there. That
Yeah.
sounds nice.
Expensive.
Oh yeah, certainly expensive, but
yeah, there's Chef Mickey's in there too,
and Chef Mickey's is when you're well, I won't. I'm sure you'll get to the transportation end of this, but Chef Mickey's is one of the most recognizable
Mhm.
Disney World restaurants. It's definitely when you think of a Disney World character breakfast,
Yeah.
I would say Chef Mickey's is what most people picture when they think of that. So I think Chef Mickey's, whatever you think about its current experience, I think it, I guess, deserves some note. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Chef Mickey's has been around since I was a kid, so
Yeah.
80s, which is, you know, but it hasn't always been in the contemporary. It was in downtown Disney before it was in the contemporary. So
Right.
so that's interesting. I think that if it's not the oldest character buffet in Disney World, then it's close.
Right.
Which is why it does have that quintessential character buffet, like it or not, you know what I mean? Feel to it. The food's not spectacular, but the characters are.
Mhm.
And that the ambiance of that restaurant where you've got the monorail, you know, going by and you're in like this kind of almost open air, even though it's not, you know what I mean, restaurant. It's really there's just something so unique about it.
Yeah.
The
And it is
characters
like,
are all dressed like chefs.
yeah, I do love that. I love anytime the characters get a little special outfit.
Yeah, me too.
So that's super fun. And it is like the vibe is definitely quintessential Disney World
Right.
in there.
Right. And that and then the other restaurants that they have in there seem a little bit more sophisticated and geared towards older audiences. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like you could go to California Grill for like a date night, and Steakhouse 71, really.
Yeah.
We love Steakhouse 71 for breakfast.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
I want it so bad.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Every time we bring it up on this show, which is fairly often, I just
Your
wish,
mouth waters.
I wish I were there.
Yeah. But neither of those restaurants have like the characters and the like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Both of those could really be date night or date breakfast.
Totally. It definitely speaks to the fact that the contemporary is one of the more luxurious or like high-end offerings
Yes.
as far as Disney World resorts go. And I think the restaurants definitely kind of paint the portrait of that because they're meant to be comfortable for adults who are used to high-end dining spaces. You know, that's the vibe.
And I think that all of the deluxe hotels that I can think of real quick all have both elements, like a character meal if you're taking your kids and everything, and then also some good like date night, more sophisticated options.
Right, for when the kids go to bed or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know. Or if you're there not with kids, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people start their marriages at Disney, like you did, like I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ron DeSantis. Everybody.
Yeah. Moving on. So the frame of the Contemporary Tower, which is what I'm going to mostly be talking about because Bay Lake Tower and then the other kind of hotel spaces don't have as much in them to discuss.
And the Bay Lake Tower, that's pretty new, right?
2009.
It wasn't there when I was a kid. So to me, she's new on the scene.
Same. And Bailey actually stayed in Bay Lake Tower with a friend for a birthday. So I know that like the views are really nice and it's very contemporary.
Whoa.
And very like kind of elegant, you know what I mean? But yeah, there's not much to talk about as far as differences
history.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Contemporary Tower is often called the A-frame. I brought this up on a podcast not too long ago where I was like, do other people call it the A-frame or is that just my family being weird? But apparently that is what it goes by a lot. So that the steel frame is like A shaped, and then it has the monorail going through it.
Yeah.
Which to me, that's the coolest thing ever.
Definitely like its signature.
I think cooler than the Grand Floridian or Polynesian, which also have monorail stops. But I mean, in the contemporary, the monorail goes straight through the resort. As a kid, this was like the most jaw-dropping thing in the world.
It seriously is. Like, you
Yeah.
feel like you're flying because
Yeah.
you're on an elevated track and you can't see the track beneath you.
Right.
So you're just like gliding through a resort. It's really magical.
It is. It is very magical.
And when you're there in the contemporary,
Yeah.
having the monorail glide through almost lends this air of like you're in like a big open like train hub or something. Like there's an element of that like futuristic
I still think
transportation.
futuristic, don't you?
I do.
I do too. And so this is made in the 70s, but like I still think that that lends it an air of futurism.
Yeah, it is like retro futurism because I
Yeah.
think even the design of the monorails themselves are kind of retro futuristic.
Right.
So when you pair that with the sensibilities of the contemporary stylings of the resort, it really makes for this complete retro futuristic picture that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Also, the style of the building, the A-frame itself,
Exactly.
like the brutalist architecture, is very different from anything at Disney World, in
Yeah.
my opinion. So I think it's like unique and cool.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Like the Grand Floridian is beautiful in its own right, but that is based off of a hotel that exists in Coronado,
Right.
in California, right?
Yeah.
So, but the contemporary, I've never seen anything like it,
Yeah, it's very special.
especially with a monorail running through it. And yeah, if you're staying there, you potentially have Magic Kingdom out your window,
Ugh.
off your balcony, and then if you walk out the door to your hallway, you've got a monorail gliding through.
Or you could just walk past Tomorrowland and be in the park.
Yeah.
You know, something walking distance to the park is kind of amazing as well.
Yeah. It's got to be the closest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. That's, yeah.
So I'm sorry. Oh,
No, that's okay.
So to construct the building, steel frames were erected on site,
Mhm.
and then the pre-constructed rooms that were designed by California architect Donald Wexler were lifted into place by a crane. So this is something that we've mentioned before. Very, very unique and unusual. This design was a collaboration by Disney, the United States Steel Corporation, and Xerox tower architect Walton Beckett.
Mm.
So the thing about the rooms is they were being built assembly line style on the land that's just north of the Port Orleans area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So close.
So close. Yeah.
Wow.
And then they were trucked over
Hmm.
to where the frame was and then lifted by crane and slid in.
What an operation.
Yeah.
I mean, it is surprising. Honestly, there's some stuff from the history of Walt Disney World. Even last week when we were talking about the railroad, they did so much of the assembly on the railroad cars in Tampa.
Yeah.
And stuff. So I get this picture sometimes where everything is being fabricated all around Florida and being trucked in.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to me to learn that they made these hotel rooms like miles away from the contemporary itself. Kind of cool.
Yeah. And the reasoning and everything is pretty fascinating, and I'm going to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
So Yesterland, who I got some of my information from.
I did too this week. Hi, Yesterland.
Wow. They did an interview with Jim Corcus about the contemporary resort and the myth that it was built the way it was built so that they could slide the rooms out, refurbish them, and slide them back in like drawers. So that is a common myth that is actually still around.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, really? Okay, well...
Yeah, I've never heard that, I don't think.
Oh, okay. So this is, like I said, it's still something that people think.
Like how people think that the top of the castle can come off in case there's a hurricane.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe a little bit more seriously than that.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know.
I can't imagine Disney setting up cranes and sliding out entire hotel rooms at a time.
Well, it's funny because somebody from the U.S. Steel Corporation or whatever actually like went on record to say that the point of them doing it the way they did it was so that they could slide them in and then slide them back out every 5 or 10 years to
Whoa.
refurbish them and keep them up to date. But that because of the building settling, they kind of got locked into place, and then Disney lost that ability. But then Jim Korkis like did this interview with Yesterland and was like, that was never the plan.
So just some guy just
Yeah,
kind of went
that's just
rogue.
what he thought. Well, and it's funny because I wound up on Reddit articles too, or Reddit threads, and people were talking about how cast members had told them that over the years.
Right.
Which
So common misinformation.
I get it. It makes me sad when I read it though.
Mm.
And I'm sorry if I'm ever the one that's giving some misinformation that I swore was true because I heard it, you know what I mean? But it's not. But
And if that ever has been the case, you can certainly let us
yeah,
know.
absolutely.
But that's also why we try to source information like
yes,
this. That's
exactly.
kind of from firsthand people who worked on the project
Yeah,
when we can. That's
right.
nice, yeah.
Yeah, you can definitely trust Jim Korkis, you know what I mean?
I sure do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the myth goes to say that the plan was the sliding in and out.
Yeah.
And then Jim Korkis said that was not the plan. And the reason that they built it in different pieces like this was because Walt was fascinated by new and innovative ideas and loved the idea when it was pitched.
Very theatrical.
It just it just sounds like, oh, this is a new, better way to do things.
Yeah, it's so futuristic to slide an entire hotel room into a frame.
Yes.
Crazy.
And I mean, just looking at the pictures now is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then B, they were on a huge time crunch to finish the hotel by the park opening because they had booked out all of their convention center dates. Like,
wow.
I mean, talk about
no pressure.
Yeah. I can't. I'm sure this happens all the time, but like as a business person, I think that would make me nuts to like. I mean, there's no option to not do it.
You really have your back up against the wall.
You really, really do. So they thought that doing it this way, they were told by the U.S. Steel Corporation that doing it this way would save them time and money. Because usually when you're building a hotel, you build the frame and then you build the rooms and decorate them.
Yeah.
And when you're doing it this way, you should theoretically be able to be doing both at the same time.
Right. That makes sense.
It does make sense. Jim Korkis went on to say that it did neither. It accomplished neither of those things. Each room was supposed to be $17,000, but wound up costing over $100,000 per room.
Whoa,
yeah.
That's definitely. I'm not an accountant, but that feels over budget to me.
Yeah.
Here's a lot.
Yeah. Here's a quote from Jim Korkis that I thought this is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so quote. The rooms were formed on an assembly line, much like automobiles, at the rate of about 40 a week. As they passed through each station on the way to completion, the electrical, mechanical, and plumbing facilities were added to the room. Each room was 9 feet high, 15 feet wide, and about 30 feet long, and had air conditioning units, piping, lighting, and even mirrors and bath fixtures in the bathrooms. So they were like fully done. Like there was the air conditioning unit was even put in.
Wow.
It's hard to imagine how they connected all this stuff because when you get in there, you got to connect the pipes to water,
wiring,
and
all kinds of stuff to get it all on the same circuits, on the same plumbing.
Right.
I can only imagine the logistical undertaking of the engineering of making that happen. Whoa.
Which is, I'm sure, why it wound up costing so much more than they were told it was going to.
I can only imagine in labor alone, it must have been crazy.
Yeah. Then each 9-ton room was placed on trucks and hauled to the Contemporary, where each room was lifted into place by massive cranes and fitted into the steel frame. Supposedly, they were to be set into the frame easily, but they often didn't fit into those exacting openings on the first try. And because of the structure, they had to alternate installing rooms on the opposite sides to prevent the framework from becoming off balance.
Right.
So in addition to we've got to do this so perfectly because of a balance issue, if they would go to slide one in and it would be just like a fraction of off in measurement, and then they'd have to take it out, try to like sand it down or whatever. You see what I'm saying? I'm no longer in my quote, by the way.
Jim Corrigan didn't say all that?
No.
That, first of all, I can't think of anything more frustrating than
Yes.
trying to slide your hotel room into your hotel and it doesn't
And it's like,
fit.
no. Yeah. Oh my God.
And then you have to take it out and try again a couple times.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And again, that's probably where at that added time, that added budget, you know what I mean?
They didn't do this again for any of the other hotels, you'll notice.
So he's like, of course, yes, exactly. Of course, this is not, we're not going to keep doing this over and over. It's terrible.
A flight of fancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he said, quote, I've looked at the paperwork from U.S. Steel and Disney, including the numerous press releases during the building of the Contemporary, and there was never any mention of rooms sliding back out. You look at the bottom of the room itself and the opening slot in the building, it isn't designed like a drawer going into a desk or dresser. Once the rooms were in place and hooked up, they settled thanks to the movement in the building, gravity, and other factors. So they sank just below the original slot. Mm-hmm. To be removed, among many other challenges, they would have to be lifted up before being pulled out. Remember, this was modular construction. If there was meant to be a rotating element, that would have been incorporated into the name to generate future clients.
That makes sense.
Yes. And then in addition to that, Yesterland's Werner Weiss goes on to mention that there were also exterior walls and balconies that were added after the rooms were put in. So this myth makes no sense.
Right.
Yeah.
when you start to break it down into the details, it's very clear that this was an invention of someone's imagination.
Yeah. Somebody's like, oh, you slid them in, so that means you could slide them back out. I mean, without really thinking about it. Yeah, right. Exactly.
You could see why someone would think, but when you bring in the balcony argument, it really, just like the rooms, it really settles. You know?
There's a commercial that if you guys have time to look up, you absolutely should. You would have to Google search the Contemporary Resort Hotel 1971 U.S. Steel commercial. It's a commercial done by the U.S. Steel, not by Disney, but it's like bragging about the Contemporary. And it's kind of comical because they say that they're in the commercial that they're confident that all schools and hotels in the future will be built this way, when in fact it was kind of a nightmare.
One and done.
Yeah. Although cruise ships still do kind of operate this way.
A similar way,
Yeah. So anyway, so that's that. So the way that this building was constructed is absolutely fascinating.
It really is. It may be, as time goes on, we may look back at it as more of a novelty, but the fact that it was kind of done in earnest as a construction experiment, I think adds a lot of charm to my vision of the resort.
Yes. Yeah. Really, really amazing. Side note, for anybody that listened to last week's podcast, I said this week I would mention where Merlin's Magic Shop was in Walt Disney World. It was in the shop that is now Sir Mickey's, which is what I guessed on the podcast. Happy to hear that was accurate.
I'm glad you remembered. We were trying to rack our brains about that for so long, and then after the episode, Morgan was like, "We were right. It was right where we said it would be."
And it was odd that it was so hard to find information on. Anyway, the Disneyland version was very much written about and mentioned and stuff like that.
Probably because it's the OG.
Yeah. So moving on from the history of the opening and everything like that. Also, if you have time to look at what some of the rooms looked like, that was kind of fun. But I mean, it was pretty standard, what I would consider 1960s, 1970s decor.
Contemporary styling.
Yeah. So the Contemporary Resort was home to some big moments in history. Well, one very important big moment in history, and that was on November 17th, 1973. The Contemporary was home to what would be one of the most famous press conference statements in modern American politics, where President Richard Nixon declared, "I am not a crook."
Amazing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite pieces of Disney little history.
Weird.
It is so strange that happened at Walt Disney World.
Weird.
Has nothing to do with Mickey.
Yeah.
Leave Mickey out of this.
Mickey wasn't there. Yeah.
So strange.
Yeah. That was during an appearance at the Associated Press Managing Editors Association annual convention, which just happened to be at the Contemporary Resort.
Right, in the convention
Yes.
center space.
And that he held a live 1-hour televised press conference, and that's where that was.
The fact that he probably after that immediately drove past the Magic Kingdom is really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, that's so weird.
Yeah. I also found on Wikipedia some incidents that happened at the Contemporary. They're not magical and happy, but would you like me to delve in?
This is a not safe for magical and happiness warning.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Morgan.
All right. On November 12th, 1992, an off-duty cast member fell off the ledge outside the Top of the World restaurant, which is now California Grill. On the 15th floor of the Contemporary, the cast member had been sitting on the ledge when a swarm of wasps appeared. While trying to swat them away, he lost his balance and fell to his death 11 stories below.
Oh, gosh.
I know. I don't sit on ledges that high. Why?
That is terrible.
It's terrible. I feel so bad for him and his family.
Yeah.
On March 22nd, 2016, a person died at Contemporary Resort, according to multiple sources. That person jumped to their death. Why would you do that there?
Yeah, I heard about this story. That's really tragic.
Really?
At the time, I remember seeing it kind of. I don't think it became like national news, but obviously because
Disney's good at pushing this stuff up sweeping this stuff under the rug.
For sure, Disney is great at sweeping this.
I had never heard any of these 3 stories.
Yeah, this one, the only reason I think I remember it happening was because at that time I was already involved enough in like theme park news and stuff that it came across my.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then and this would be in that time slot too. On May 28th, 2018, an intoxicated man was arrested at Contemporary after he falsely told other guests an active shooter was in the resort. Panic soon followed, and the resort was placed on lockdown until police could arrive. The reports were tracked back to the man, who was found hiding in bushes outside the resort. When questioned, the man claimed that his motive was to get reactions from people for a class and his YouTube channel.
I'll speak to this.
Okay. We would never do this.
Oh my gosh. How, in today's America, how careless with other people do you have to be?
I know.
I don't care if you're drunk.
When I first started reading this, like just the first sentence, I was like, oh, this has to be like somebody that had some sort of mental instability. No, it's for YouTube likes? What?
Because he was drunk.
And wanted YouTube likes.
Right. As people who want YouTube likes, I can't imagine resorting to this level of.
You cannot, right?
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just not.
I'm only saying that because you didn't enunciate, and I knew what you meant.
I appreciate that. You're right. I can't imagine. Possibly, it would never cross my mind.
I know. I wouldn't do any of the stuff people get in trouble for.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, there's some stuff that I can maybe even understand. Like, I guess I shouldn't say understand, but I can understand the psychological, perhaps, reasoning.
Do you, like what? Like climbing the Mexico building?
No, I think that person was probably drunk. I mean, like,
I'm sure.
People who let their curiosity get the best of them and want to, like, sneak into a backstage area.
Oh.
Nothing I would ever do.
I like watching that stuff, though.
So you can also perhaps understand the psyche behind it.
Yes.
This is a different level to me. Right.
This is different. Yes. This is criminal.
I've never heard that.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That is wild.
Yeah, that's criminal. If you're trying to climb the Mexico building in Epcot, I mean, that's ridiculous.
That's something else.
Yeah. But it's not criminal. It's Disney criminal. But this is like
it really only would probably hurt you.
This person should probably still be in jail.
Especially like to exploit people's fear.
I know, and ruin their vacation.
An active shooter situation.
Yeah, that's something that we're all afraid of all the time these days.
Yeah.
Especially I'm sure parents.
Yeah. I hope that man is never allowed to return.
I'm sure.
Because that's usually Disney's kind of way of dealing with stuff like that.
Yeah.
Public disruptions. If they trespass you.
Yeah. If they trespass you for drinking water out of the fountain, I'm sure this person got trespassed. I hope they also got some jail time.
Yeah.
It's just not right.
There's a ton of laws that he broke by doing that as well.
Yeah.
So I would hope.
Yeah.
Wow. that I've never
I hate
heard.
to end on that terrible note.
No, honestly, I'd never heard
I just was like, oh,
that
this is
one.
interesting.
Yeah, no, it really is interesting. I can't think of another situation really like that where a guest intentionally started a panic.
Yeah.
That really is. I mean, sometimes there have been situations where guests have panicked in the park, but never because a guest
Actually
incited
started
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
All right. Wow. Okay. So is that
Yeah,
the
I hate
contemporary?
to end there. I'm
No,
sorry. I
you did a really
really,
good job.
until I was reading it, I was like, oh no, I can't end here, but this is the end of my research.
Um, the contemporary
It's a great place to see fireworks.
has a great mural by Mary Blair.
Oh, yes, yes. I did not get into the mural because we had talked about it before, but
Yeah.
is there anything else you know of that we didn't really talk about?
No. We got pretty into it last time.
Yeah.
There's really not. Honestly, I don't know if the story. I mean, I'm sure the dimensions of it, hearing it would probably be interesting because it's huge.
Yeah.
It's definitely.
And there's more than just that one that you can see from the monorail.
Yeah, like wraps around a little
Mhm.
bit. It's on the center tower, in the middle of the A-frame in the Grand Canyon concourse, and it's like a mosaic mural. It's inspired by landscapes of indigenous people, and it's got fanciful recreations of animals all over it. It's one of Mary Blair, who's a Disney legend, one of her largest installations ever, and like it's one of my favorite pieces of Walt Disney World because it's so original Disney.
Yes.
It's got that Disneyland classic charm, but it combines with the innovation of the contemporary resort to make something one of a kind.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that gives me the feeling of looking at that
Right.
It's so strange.
Yeah.
It's like weird, but it's beautiful. It doesn't.
Yes.
It like the art. It's so artistic that like contemporary art being the focus of the contemporary resort makes a lot of sense. But if you don't think about that context and it's just like this indigenous people's mosaic in the middle of Walt Disney World,
Yeah.
it's like very strange to look at, but that is part of the whimsy for me,
Right.
is that it's like kind of a counterbalance of aesthetic.
Yeah. And also, I did forget to mention, in the last few years, the rooms have been redecorated, refurbished, redecorated into an Incredibles theme.
Right.
It also has a monorail theme to the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I really want to stay one day because I love The Incredibles. I love The Incredibles 2. When Bailey was little, that was a favorite movie at our house. So
that's awesome.
yeah.
What do you feel about the integration of The Incredibles into the contemporary? Because they did room touches inspired by The Incredibles, and also now on the hallways, which are visible throughout the hotel in the atrium and from the monorail, they've got like Incredibles inspired wallpaper on the walls. Do you feel like that's too much, or do you feel like that's like a good, like a synergistic incorporation of the IP?
To me, it's definitely subtle enough that I'm not like, oh, you redid this in a completely different theme just for the sake of getting your IP. So I love it. The Incredibles has like an Art Deco vibe to the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
Art Deco, right?
Like a mod type of vibe for sure.
Yeah,
I think
it fits really
mid-century too.
Mid-century
Yeah, okay. Like all of the furnishings are all that like angular mid-century design that I think it's a pretty good fit.
Yeah, I think it's a good fit too.
I also don't think it's because the aesthetics of the movie and the overall feel of the contemporary, I don't think are that different from each other.
Yeah.
I think the same thing about Moana being incorporated into the Polynesian.
As long as it's done subtly, I think that it's good. I think it's a good thing.
I think the Moana Polynesian rooms are a little more like hit you over the head Moana.
Oh, is it?
Than the Incredible ones are, but I still think they're tasteful, and I think that the themes are so
perfectly matched.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily think, I feel like it's all still one experience.
Yeah.
So it's not disparate to me, and I think that's the most important thing, is that it doesn't feel jagged.
Do you feel like they've crossed the line in any of the hotels?
No.
Have you seen the pirate rooms?
Oh, the Pirates of the Caribbean room?
Yeah.
I think anything that is a Pirates of the Caribbean theme room is allowed to be as piratey as it wants to be.
It is over the top, hit you on the head. Yeah.
Because, well,
but it's in Caribbean Beach.
And I feel like that's fine.
Fair.
Because Caribbean Beach is kind of the whole idea of a Caribbean...
Watch me be wrong.
Resort at Disney. I feel like it's supposed to be a little, like, cartoonish and fun.
No, I'm right.
Yeah, okay, cool. I also don't think that... I think if you're going to have a Pirates-themed room, I think only a family who knows they're getting a Pirates-themed room would end up in there. So...
Yeah.
You get what you want. You
know? I booked one of these rooms in 2016, and at that time, at least, there was the option: do you want a Pirates room or a non-Pirates room? So
nice.
Yeah,
love that.
Yeah,
I'd like to stay in one. I like Pirates.
It's fun. Stuff. It's like your bed is like a ship.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I've never seen the inside.
Oh, I'll show you after.
Okay.
It's fun.
Nice. All right. Great job, Morgan.
Oh,
I learned so much about the contemporary. I honestly didn't know that much, I don't think. So especially hearing some of the incidents throughout history.
Yeah.
I am someone who thinks that type of stuff is really interesting. Because Disney doesn't write about it often, you know what I mean? So you kind of have to put your own story together.
They don't want to be associated with it, so they just won't tell you about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was another historical thing that I thought happened at the Contemporary, but it actually happened at a different Disney hotel, but I'm not even going to mention it in case that's your hotel.
Okay. I don't think it is. Are you talking about the Beatles?
I am.
Okay, yeah.
Did you think that was at the Contemporary?
I thought that was at the Poly.
It is.
It is at the Poly?
But in my head, I don't think that I even heard that it was at the Contemporary. I think my brain just did that at some point.
You think all the major historical stuff.
Yes.
Honestly, that makes a lot of sense to me since the Poly was a little later. I think the Polynesian...
Later?
What?
What do you mean?
Well, the Polynesian was built after the Contemporary, right?
Well, they were both opening day hotels.
Oh.
But this did happen later, the Beatles thing. So they had already been like broken up and not doing anything together.
Yeah.
And it was just that John Lennon got the paperwork to sign, and that's where he did it.
Mm-hmm.
He apparently looked out over Bay Lake and at the castle and then signed the end of the Beatles. But really they had been done for like a year.
Practically.
Yes. He just hadn't gotten the paperwork from the lawyers about how it happens.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, the Polynesian.
The Polynesian. Oh, I was thinking of the Grand Floridian.
That was after.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Gotcha. Wow.
And you could be right. I mean, it could... But it couldn't have been too much later because they were both opening day.
No, I think you're right. I think there were two when it opened, and I think it was the Poly and the Contempt, and then the Grand Floridian came a little bit later.
Yes.
Yeah. I just had
That's
confused,
good theme park trivia.
That is really good theme park trivia because so many people go around that loop. You know, I'm sure.
I think everybody assumes that all three were opening day, don't you think?
Yeah, I think I did when I was a child. I was
too.
like, well, these have been here the whole time because they're on the monorail.
Right, how could they not have been built at the same time? They're all on the monorail loop.
And if I was going to pick one that was built later, it would not be the Grand Floridian.
I know.
Because it feels so duh.
Yeah.
Of course, you've got to have your signature luxury.
For sure.
Thing, and it feels so, classic now that can't imagine Walt Disney World without it.
Yeah.
Although that Bay Lake, or I guess Seven Seas Lagoon, skyline is about to change a little.
Seven Seas Lagoon.
Yeah. With the addition of the Polynesian DVC tower.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we'll let you know what we think. All right, are you ready for some other history?
Yeah.
Do you want to guess?
It's funny because I was going to guess Polynesian, but now I know it's not. I guess I'm going to guess the Riviera.
Oh, that would be nice. That would be some recent history.
That's his favorite. Yep, it would be recent.
Nope. I'm not even doing a resort. We're doing river country.
What?
Hey!
You're a cheater.
This is a resort property. What are you talking about? It's attached to the resort.
Okay.
This was the pool of... It really was the pool of Fort Wilderness when it opened. But anyway, it is attached to a resort, so I was like, it's in the resort category. When else am I going to get to do this? Are we ever going to do a water park episode?
We could.
Oh, well, then we can't do river country.
That's okay.
Sorry. Okay, so river country, Do you guys know what river country is?
Possibly not.
Probably
It's a
not.
deep cut.
Yeah, it hasn't been around since the 2000s, so maybe you don't remember this, but it was
And
Disney
even before
World's.
that, it wasn't that popular, right?
Right.
At the end?
Not at all, and we'll get into why. But River Country was Walt Disney World's first water park, and that's what they built it as. It was located at Disney's Fort Wilderness Resort and Campground, which we still have today. And using a unique filtration system and an intentionally high water level, it was built to look like a natural lagoon on Bay Lake, which is pretty cool. It gave that effect where two different sets of water meet, and it was like its own little alcove, which was a pretty unique effect to look at for its visitors. And people often wondered, how is there not lake water getting in here? How does the lake water not mix with the lagoon water? But it's because they set the water level of the water park intentionally higher so that water park water could go into the lake, but lake water could not go into the water park. So
Okay.
they were also dammed off between each other so that the waters wouldn't overlap lake to lake to park, which is an interesting feat of Imagineering for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. I'm trying to like imagine how that would work. Go on.
It's like its own separate thing on the edge of Bay Lake, but they're right up next to each other and separated by a wall, so it looks like it's one piece of water.
Okay.
It's a pretty convincing effect as well because a lot of people were concerned that they were taking in the lake water.
Sure.
Anyway, the park was themed as a rustic, old-fashioned swimming hole and opened June 20th, 1976. So we're talking about the 70s for sure. River Country's bottom was sandy, and a unique water filtering system using confluent water from Bay Lake, which was dammed off to create a natural-looking artificial lagoon, was the park's signature. So that it also like pumped water from the lake, filtered it, and used it as rapids. So there was a lot of there was a lot of being interested in separating yourself from the lake, but then also using water from the lake to get the park going. So that is an interesting model that probably would not be used today for a water park now that lake water certainly has a reputation in Florida.
Yeah.
Anyway, some river country attractions, since we're getting into the water park spirit of it all. There was the Upstream Plunge, which was a clean water pool. The Slippery Slide Falls, which was probably what people think most of when they think of river country because it was the most recognizable, I guess, attraction. It was two water slides that emptied into the Upstream Plunge. There was also a Kiddie Cove, which was a kids zone with two water slides targeted toward preteens. There's a barrel bridge similar to the one on Tom Sawyer Island. Whitewater Rapids, which were a 330-foot mile-long inner tube river, so a nice, not so lazy river, like a water rapids experience.
All right.
And then Bay Cove, which was a sand bottom lake, which featured a tire swing, a boom swing, rope climbing, and a T-bar drop. So that thing where you hold on to a bar and then you drop into a pool. These, I think, were really iconic imagery to river country because these kind of like rope swing and water activities felt very rustic and were a good fit for Fort Wilderness.
Yeah, it feels very Tom Sawyer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think like Tom Sawyer, old school American adventure is definitely backwoods style adventure was definitely the vibe. And I can just picture like banjo music and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, same.
There's also the Whoop and Hollow, which was a double water slide that emptied into Bay Cove. So lots of water slides, not by current water park standards, but for a small water park attached to a resort, guests really thought it was a great offering.
Yeah.
It feels kind of to me like Stormalong Bay, which is the big pirate ship water complex that is shared between Yacht Club and Beach Club. They've got that big, like, it's a water slide and it's pools, and I think this is more elaborate than that. Yeah. But it's got that kind of whimsical, larger than life mini water park aesthetic.
Okay.
I think that's fun.
Yeah.
So obviously that sounds like a beautiful, wholesome, rustic Disney experience, but there's trouble in river country.
Yeah.
There are several deaths. Oh, this is also not safe for magic and happiness.
God.
Which I didn't
We'll
know.
call this the death episode.
Yeah, this is the death portion. Each story has a death portion. There are several deaths that took place at River
We've
Country.
Transitioned into true crime.
True, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Magical true crime. The first of these deaths was of an 11-year-old boy who contracted an amoebic infection of the brain from the water in 1980.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
Not good. This was somewhat buzzworthy news for everyone. There was an AP Associated Press story that went out to several newspapers all over the country talking about this, and obviously it was the constant focus of the local news. And it evolved into a larger-than-life, mostly untrue urban legend that has been circulated online as the definitive reason for the park's closure. But the event made headlines in 1980, but the park remained open until 2001. So
wild.
Most of the time in people's brains, I think they think there's this brain-eating amoeba, and it shut down the park, and then it reopened and no one went back because they were afraid of the brain-eating amoeba.
I would be.
And that is somewhat true, because ever since the incident, there was a decline in attendance at the park, but Disney never closed the park at all.
That's shocking.
So even...
Did they fix the problem? Was it actually a Disney problem?
So this story goes out, and it's actually a story largely on the effects of brain-eating amoeba in lakes all across Florida. But it starts off with the Disney World death.
Of course.
And then names 4 others. So it makes it look like this is like a massive problem that is affecting all water in Florida, including the water at Disney. So it doesn't look good, but Disney responds, and they say, their spokesperson comes out and says, this is actually a really common problem in Florida, as you can see, and it's nothing that Disney could have done to prevent it, and it's extremely rare. So they go with that, and they keep the ball rolling.
Is there a chance the kid had gone in the lake and it wasn't the water? Were they conclusive that it was the water from the water park?
There was an investigation involving the state that went on, and they were able to pinpoint River Country as the only time that the victim had swam. So there was, in the minds of the people who were overseeing the investigation, there was no question that Disney water was the water that gave this child the brain-eating amoeba.
Okay.
Which was...
Because I know kids used to get in the lakes up until the incident, which was like in 2016.
There was lake access for a bunch of activities at Walt Disney World, especially early on in its history in the 70s. This was the first issue of amoeba that had come to the attention, at least of the media. So Disney was quick to mention that they have a lot of lake-going activities, and this was the first time anything like this had happened, you know?
Yeah.
So that was kind of their defense. A lot of people thought that that was not an adequate defense. So, you know, if you're considering guest safety, I could see how this might be a little bit of a mark on the public reputation of Disney, but at the same time, one can be perhaps slightly sympathetic of a first-time brain-eating amoeba incident.
Sure.
Seems very sad.
But I think the rumors, like you said, went totally wild, because like if you're saying that that's not why they closed, which is definitely what you're saying, that is what I've heard my whole life. They closed because they were killing people, not person.
Right. Well, that headline was in 1980, and then we still have 2 decades of the story left.
Oh, okay.
So park officials noted that similar infections also occurred relatively frequently elsewhere, and said it was an inherent problem with freshwater lakes and warm weather, and could not be blamed on the park's water system. So people were really scared that the water filtration system utilizing some of the lake water had failed, and that was the reason the amoeba had gotten into the park's water stream in the first place. But Disney came out strong against this, saying that there was nothing they could do to prevent the situation, and that there were no faults on the water filtration system at all. This is something that always happens when there's an incident at Walt Disney World. They always say they found no problems with the ride, they found no problems with this, so that, you know, it can lead people to assume that Disney could not have a reasonable chance to foresee and protect against the issue at hand. That is like their constant marketing strategy
Mhm.
in these situations. Three other children had similarly died in Florida in the same month that this happened. So
Okay.
that's definitely some bad timing for Disney as well. The other two deaths were at the park that took place were unfortunate drownings that took place in 1982 and 1989. So there were other deaths in the park, but they were drowning incidents of children. So that's also super unfortunate and maybe speaks to a lack of, guest safety in general in people's minds. So that doesn't help to have drownings after the brain-eating amoeba. It just makes it seem maybe not so safe. So after the second drowning in 1989, that's when park attendance really began to like drop off because that's a lot of bad publicity.
Yeah.
It was definitely spread out, but the brain-eating amoeba was such a sensational. The term brain-eating amoeba is so
I know.
sensational
Mhm.
that I feel like they never even really had a chance to recover after that.
Okay, I just read an article the other day about this surfacing
Mhm.
here in Florida again.
The amoeba.
I don't know if it's the same, but
Mhm.
like the same situation, but it was in brackish water.
Wow.
I'm just like, this must be a thing that happens a lot.
Right. Huh, spooky.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 1989 was that other drowning, and then that same year, Disney opened a second water park called Typhoon Lagoon. It had a lot more parking, more water slides, newer amenities. It was a lot bigger. So that's some steep competition. And then 6 years later, in 1995, Blizzard Beach was opened, which was also a lot bigger and had a lot more slides and attractions than River Country. So now you've got, let's draw up the tally here. 1 brain-eating amoeba death, 2 drownings, and 2 state-of-the-art large water parks looming in the shadow of River Country.
Uh-huh.
So, the park closed on November 2nd, 2001 for its typical annual seasonal closure, and fans assumed that it would reopen in the spring of 2002. And then on April 11th, 2002, the Orlando Sentinel reported that Walt Disney World's first water park, River Country, has closed and may not reopen.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
The other drownings that you talked about in the 80s, were those all at River Country?
Both of those drownings were at River Country,
Okay.
yeah. So the River Country death toll is 3, officially.
All right.
Right.
Sad.
That is quite sad. The Disney World spokesman, Bill Warren, stated that River Country could be reopened if there's enough guest demand. I thought that was a really interesting and funny thing for him to say.
Yeah.
Because basically
Clearly they didn't say that about Mr. Toad.
Oh my gosh. Right. I guess he was trying to encourage a letter writing campaign.
Yeah. Where are you guys?
Yeah, that doesn't. That's not said anymore.
Yeah. Where are the picketers?
Yeah. Where are the people tying themselves to the River Country? In 2005, Disney officially announced that River Country was closed permanently. So even though it hadn't been open since 2002, it was not until 2005 that Disney came out and said, "We're not doing this anymore." River Country then sat abandoned for 17 years, rotting and being gradually reclaimed by nature in the way that some Disney stuff does.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, and if you've seen pictures of River Country during this time, it is like a fascinating, super unsafe thing.
It's like a somebody traveling to some historic lost city. You know what I mean?
And that's, I'm sure, how
that's
they
the
felt.
Vibe. Yeah.
The park was a popular site among urban explorers who climbed over the green fence or even walked through the backstage driveway to gain access to the park.
Or scuba dive, right?
One
of the...
Oh, is that what happened?
There was one that I heard of, one of the more famous urban explorers that got to, maybe it wasn't there, maybe it's Discovery Island. Yeah, I just clicked. Sorry.
So first of all, River Country and Discovery Island are not far apart at all, which is interesting. But also, I definitely think we need to talk about that sometime too.
Yeah.
Because that's its own thing, for sure. But those same content creators who did that, I think River Country also was something that they did. River Country is something that I think there is more backstage footage of than maybe anything else, just because the fact that it sat there for so long.
Yeah.
Also, there was some time where the fence was not entirely covered, so guests could just take pictures and video of the rotting park with their phone and
Yeah.
just kind of put it
Wow.
on YouTube. So you could see over the course of 17 years how foliage, vines had totally reclaimed all of the fabricated structures that Disney had built for it. So the fabricated rocks became covered with moss, all of the swings and ladders that created the platforms that the park had were completely covered by vines and crazy
Wild.
stuff. You can still see some of the pictures now if you Google abandoned river country. Really interesting. Disney did fill in the pool, probably so they wouldn't get sued if somebody, I guess, fell into the pool. I don't know. I don't know about the liability of all that, but that
Yeah.
seems to be the only reason I could think of, or maybe to prevent sitting water from developing new brain-eating amoebas or whatever the situation was. So anyway, the park was fenced off with signs up reading, "Sorry, River Country is closed." The park was a popular site for the urban explorers, and it still played the River Country theme years after it was abandoned, which is really creepy.
Creepy.
Yeah,
What, all the time?
yeah, and they kept the lights on in there too. So I think
That's to keep people out.
I think that's yeah, exactly, to like ward off people.
Yeah.
And I don't know why the music is playing, but I've
Creepy.
seen it myself in the video, so
Yeah.
that's really wild. Definitely one of the creepier things I've read about Disney.
It might not have been creepy the first couple months,
Mhm.
but
Years.
yeah.
Lights were also turned on automatically as Disney appeared not to have cut off power to the park, and the River Country water tower toward the entrance was removed a few years after the closing, and then it was moved. On August 25th, 2016, Disney announced that it would drain and fill in Upstream Plunge, which was the pool, and there were no immediate plans to tear down any other part of the park. A deluxe resort named Reflections at Disney Lakeside Lodge was announced as a new project that would be built over River Country's footprint. So finally, after all these years of being abandoned, it looked like they were going to do something with that land. After that project was announced in 2018, many structures at the park, including the remnants of the pool, were demolished on April 20th of 2019 to make way for the development of the new hotel. So that was the kind of nail in the coffin for the structures that were surviving at River Country. Due to COVID-19, the Parks Division
Saw
had
this coming, right?
halted all major construction on Walt Disney World resort property, including Reflections, with only a large empty clearing where the hotel was planned adjacent to the Fort Wilderness Pioneer Hall remaining. So if you know where Hoop-Dee-Doo is and Trails End, which is in that one building, and if you know where the horse ranch is, where all the horses live, in between those two spaces, there's just a big old field sitting on the edge of Bay Lake that was the cleared land that was meant for this hotel, and that cleared land is still there now.
It's so funny how they do that, because that same kind of situation happened with Pop Century, where they had the hotel ready, then because of something terrible that happened in this country, decided to halt it, and then once they got the finances to go back and do it, they're like, "Oh, well, it's been too long.
Yeah,
we got to do something new now."
Right.
It's been 4 years.
Yeah, I did think it was odd that they chose not to follow through.
I mean,
I think it was a change in park leadership that led to that, because there was certainly an interest once tourism was back up on the incline.
Yeah.
I think they thought the characters were a safer bet. You know what I mean? That's the only reason that makes sense in my mind. Instead of doing another Decades theme, which they had already done, instead getting some of their most popular IP in the form of like...
Yeah, I get that one. I do. I don't get this Reflections one not happening.
Yeah, maybe they're waiting for their money to become more liquid. They're waiting to get some of that Disney Plus money that they lost back. Maybe they're looking to...
But they're still doing stuff.
Yeah. I would say that this was probably one of their lower down priorities, because it's also not like there's necessarily a shortage of like resort stuff, since tourism has been slow in Florida. So I bet they're just trying to bolster their current properties and hold off on major financial investment. It does kind of seem weird just to have an empty field in the middle of Fort Wilderness.
Do you know if it was going to be DVC?
I think they were going to bill it as a deluxe resort that also had DVC rooms, I
Okay,
believe.
because with DVC, it's a lot of people that are buying into DVC are kind of paying for it. So
Right.
I don't know. I just maybe it'll happen. They
Yeah,
haven't
maybe.
said no, right?
Yeah. Reports have been that the project has been currently canceled until further notice. Like
Okay,
there's no work going on at it at all, and there has
right.
not been since COVID. So it's definitely on freeze right now, but Disney also has like come out and said they're going to do something else with the land.
Okay,
So it's in that state of, I guess, development hell, as it would be called in the film industry, where it's kind of just sitting there.
yeah,
So it's kind of sad when stuff like that happens,
it
especially as a
is.
result of something like COVID.
Yeah.
That sucks. Anyway, one of the Fort Wilderness pools, the Meadow Swimming Pool that's there right now, features a winding water slide that includes the water tower from the now closed River Country Water Park.
Oh, I did not know that.
So if you want to visit a remnant of the good old water country and you want to hear that what did I say, water country? River country, and you want to hear that river country music in your head, you can at least see it at the Fort Wilderness pool.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
I like when there's remnants of stuff.
I do too.
I am sad that the park sat abandoned for so long, and that when we finally got the word of something that would replace it,
that didn't happen either.
That didn't happen either. Seems like a big series of like a comedy of misfortune.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the troubled past of River Country.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Great job.
It turned out to be a little bit different than I thought it was, so that's always fascinating.
Okay.
I also didn't know that anything survived, so that was really like I was so excited to hear that the water tower at least made it, because that was a pretty big icon of River Country from everything that I've seen.
Yeah.
I never got to visit, but I had heard about it, and it's probably, at least, I would say maybe the number 2 Disney urban legend.
Yeah.
The brain-eating amoeba. Probably maybe only taken by the Discovery Island situation, which definitely has its own creepypasta-like versions of its story all over the internet. But it was cool to get into the facts of the story. And looking at the Orlando Sentinel article was fascinating, because you could tell it was like such breaking news with such urgency that someone had succumbed to something so scary at a Disney park.
Yeah.
Definitely one of Disney's first major PR scandals. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it is kind of a sad story, but there's also, I think a lot of people have really fond memories of the informal nature of River Country. It was just kind of like this old school backyard water adventure that your family could go on. It almost had the air of being like, I don't want to say not safe, but more carefree. It was like rope slides and stuff. Sure. That's not how we think of Disney now, but also very much the vibe of Disney World in the 70s.
Yeah.
Outdoor activities, especially at Fort Wilderness, were the bread and butter of non-park activities at Walt Disney World. So this is definitely an echo of that time. And seeing it replaced by the 2 water parks that we have now, it definitely speaks to the evolution of cultural taste as well, because people wanted, a larger than life water park experience, and that's what they got. And poor River Country was just caught in the brain-eating crossfire.
Yeah, I think that, that happens. If a child dies, your business is... I'm glad Disney didn't go under. You know what I mean?
Yeah, hard to recover, but definitely, I think a testament to Disney's perseverance, I guess you could say. I think it would have been handled very differently now, especially when you consider it to other tragedies that have happened more recently at Disney World, especially not even closing the park at all. I thought was very... I had heard that after the brain-eating amoeba, they closed the park for years just to
I thought so too.
That was part of the urban legend that I had understood. So to hear that they kind of just kept on trucking through it was kind of surprising to me.
Who was still going?
Yeah, people.
I can't imagine. We're all just trying to keep our kids alive,
Yeah. Wow, this has been an interesting episode, because we've delved a little bit more into some of the darker things that emerge just from having a resort that has thousands of people in it for years and years and years. Stuff is going to happen.
So when you
stumble upon some of the more interesting stuff that has happened, it can be a fascinating contrast to all of the like whimsy and impressive architecture and stuff that goes into Disney.
Yeah.
It paints a more comprehensive portrait of the park as it actually is too. You know what I mean? To
And I
add
know
some
a lot of
humanity.
these stories and I still trust them.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
It's true
there's
because,
something to be said.
yeah, when you think about how many people experience the offerings at Walt Disney World and people like us who have been going our entire lives and have never felt anything but safe,
Mhm.
except for one time when I was a child, I was in a tram collision. I think I've told that
I think
story
you
on here
have.
in the MGM parking lot. That was
Yeah,
really scary,
right.
but also human fault.
Forgot.
Right.
Yeah.
So, other than that, I've always felt really, really safe at Walt Disney World. Definitely a testament to their ability to make guests feel comfortable and to enact safety measures that actually inspire confidence in the park
Yeah.
safety measures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, that's about going to do it. I thought this was a really interesting episode. Thanks.
Fascinating. Yeah.
All right. If you guys want to hear more and you're on a podcast platform like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, thank you for listening. And also, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review if you've enjoyed. We'd love to hear what you think of our little tales from Disney's history.
Yeah. And if you're watching us on YouTube, then if you could like and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We also do more short form content on Instagram and TikTok at Neverland Navco.
And then we've got an Etsy store called Neverland Navigation.
Yeah, fun custom t-shirt prints and all kinds of fun park inspired stuff on there as well. And you can visit us online at neverlandnavigation.co.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, we'll see you on our next adventure.
Bye.